Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Mm.
Ever find yourself needing to, really get the essence of something complex, fast, like prepping for a big meeting or trying to understand tricky stuff like therapy or just how people interact? It can be a lot, right? Well, that's what we do here. We take notes, sources, research all that raw info, and pull out the absolute key nuggets. Think of it as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. And today, wow, we have something pretty unique. We're doing a deep dive into the 2024-2025 Supervision course, led by John Frederickson and Yuval Lon. And the cool part, we're working directly from their notes, the teacher's own takeaways.
Yeah, it's like getting a peek behind the curtain, really, seeing what they flagged as the most vital learnings for advanced therapeutic practice over the past year.
So it's not just a summary, it's their distilled wisdom.
Exactly. And when you look through these notes, one thing just leaps out. It's the central, powerful theme. The absolute importance of the patient's own will to heal.
The will to heal, okay.
Yeah, it sounds maybe simple, but the notes show how everything the therapist does, their presence, their techniques, even just their own awareness in the moment, can either really boost that healing impulse or accidentally get in its way.
So it's fundamental. It changes how you even think about therapy.
It really does. It shifts the whole perspective.
Okay, so this sounds like more than just techniques. What specific insights, what kind of aha moments are we going to unpack from these teachers' notes today?
We'll dig into what it really means to use that will to heal as your main guide, like a compass.
Okay.
We'll look at the structure they laid out for a session, which is super clear. Then understanding defenses, not just as internal things, but as things that happen between people.
Ah, relational events. Interesting.
Right. And the importance of keeping the whole process clear and collaborative. Plus, helping patients feel emotions where they actually belong. That was a big one.
Feeling them where they belong.
And how the therapist's own reactions, their countertransference, can be a really useful signal. And finally, this idea of the therapist actively taking care of the process.
Wow, okay. That is a rich list. I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah, and they all connect. They form this kind of coherent picture of the therapeutic journey, all centered around aligning with that patient's drive towards health.
All right, let's start with that first big one from the notes. The will to heal as the guiding compass. As helpers, maybe especially as therapists, we're often trained to spot problems and then, fix them, to do something.
Right, the doer instinct.
Exactly. But these notes seem to challenge that directly. They're saying therapy works best when it follows the patient's wish to heal, not what the therapist thinks is needed.
Absolutely. That's a huge takeaway. The notes point out how easily we as therapists can jump into action based on our own ideas, maybe even our own anxieties about not knowing. Instead of really waiting, really letting the patient show us their actual internal problem and their, inherent ability to heal.
So the shift is from doing to observing.
To becoming a clear observer. Yeah, that's the phrase they use. It means being okay with not knowing for a bit, staying present, waiting for clarity to come from the patient. It's about trusting their unconscious process, really.
Trusting the patient's system to lead. That's a big shift.
Yeah.
Instead of you steering, you're following their internal map.
Precisely.
And there's that quote in the notes. As much as you let yourself practice the understanding of the patient's problem, the more therapy will be driven by the patient's wish to heal.
Powerful, isn't it? It changes the relationship. It's built on respecting the patient's innate capacity to get better.
It really is.
That's right.
But, okay, if the patient's will is the compass, how do you actually structure a session to follow it? Especially if they aren't consciously saying, here's my will to heal.
Great question. And that leads right into the next key insight, the stages of a therapeutic session. The notes offer a very clear structure here. It all starts with one critical question. Has the patient actually declared an internal problem? Not just what's wrong externally, but an internal issue they want help with.
Internal, that's the key word there. So what internal problem do you want help with?
Exactly. And if they haven't declared one clearly, you stay there. You don't rush ahead. You keep asking gently, what is the internal problem? Or what's the problem you want help with? The goal is clarity for both of you.
Right, for the patient too.
Absolutely. Only after they've declared it clearly do you ask for a specific example of that problem in action.
Okay, so declare the problem, then get a specific example.
Yes. And when you get that example, the notes stress being really precise, you're listening for what they call the triangle of conflict.
Ah, the triangle of conflict. Can you unpack that a bit for us? What does that involve?
Sure. It's basically a map of their inner experience in that specific moment you're discussing. You're trying to identify three things: The core feeling like sadness, anger, closeness. The anxiety or discomfort, that feeling, might stir up maybe tightness in the chest, feeling flustered, wanting to run.
Uh-huh.
And the defenses they use to avoid the feeling or the anxiety, maybe changing the subject, intellectualizing, minimizing it, cracking a joke.
Got it. Feeling, anxiety, defense.
Yeah.
In a specific moment.
Exactly. Seeing that triangle helps you connect with their actual immediate experience. It helps build the alliance. But what if you can't see that triangle clearly? What if it's fuzzy?
Yeah, what did the notes say about that? What do you look for then?
If it's hard to pin down, the notes suggest asking, is the patient using defenses against being specific? Are they being vague, abstract?
Okay.
And crucially, what's happening in the transference? Remember, transference is when old relationship patterns and feelings get unconsciously replayed with the therapist.
In the here and now.
Yes. So you listen beneath the surface to the latent content, the process between you, the transference, the conflict, any enactments playing out. The unconscious is always communicating, moment by moment. If you listen closely to that, it guides you back to their wish to heal.
You know, that point about defenses, we often think of them as purely internal, like a mental shield. But these notes talk about defenses as relational events. That really caught my eye. They happen between people in the room.
Yes. This is such a key insight. It makes transference feel less abstract. The notes say transference is basically human behavior happening in the moment.
Okay.
So when the therapist sees that behavior, say, the patient always intellectualizes when a feeling gets close happening with them, they can gently point it out.
Right there in the interaction.
Exactly. Like I notice when we get near that sadness, you shift to analyzing it. The patient can then see the defense not just as a thought process, but as something they do in relationships.
Connecting the behavior to the relationship.
And then you name its function. It seems like analyzing helps keep that sadness at bay. Linking it like that helps them see how it connects to their problems outside therapy. That clarity is crucial.
So see the pattern in the relationship first. Understand its job. Then maybe explore the feeling. The notes really emphasize this. But when we don't understand the defenses or their function and just ask for feelings, we're not really working in the relationship. We're just trying to do something for the patient.
Precisely. It implies that just pushing for feelings without dealing with the defense can actually backfire, or at least be ineffective. You're working against the current in a way.
Like trying to drive with the handbrake on.
Exactly. You need to understand the why, the function, before inviting the what, the feeling.
So how does all this focus on clarity in the relationship play out over time in therapy?
Well, that leads nicely to the next point, the importance of a clear and collaborative process. The notes are really clear that therapy can get stuck or even be unhelpful if the process isn't clear or if the therapist isn't working with the patient collaboratively.
So the patient needs to know what's going on.
Yes, they need to understand what they're working on, why, what the steps are. The therapist isn't imposing things, they're helping the patient reflect. Interventions need to be precise, make sense in the moment.
Okay. And how does that look in practice?
It often means slowing things down, naming the process as it happens, pointing out when the frame, the structure and purpose of the session seems to be holding or when it's maybe breaking down a bit.
Like if the patient goes off track?
Yeah, or it gets overwhelmed by defenses, or maybe even something the therapist is doing isn't quite landing right. It's about keeping things transparent, working together so both people know the rules of the game and the goal.
Makes sense. Now, going back to emotions, there was that really powerful lesson in the notes. Feeling emotions where they belong. What does that mean exactly? Distinguishing present from past feelings.
Precisely. It's about helping patients feel emotions in the context where they actually originated or belong. We so often displace feelings, right? We get angry at the traffic when we're really upset about something else entirely.
Right. Or guilty about something minor when there's a bigger unresolved guilt elsewhere.
Exactly. And the notes put it starkly. Feeling guilt and any emotion where it belongs is healing. Feeling the feelings where they don't belong is misleading and actually harmful.
Harmful? Wow.
Yeah. Think about it. Venting anger at your boss when it's really old rage at a parent doesn't resolve the original issue. It might even reinforce the pattern. Helping someone feel the anger or sadness or guilt towards the actual source allows for real integration, not just acting out or staying stuck.
Okay, that's a really crucial distinction. And that connects to the therapist's own experience, doesn't it? When they get pulled into the patient's world. The notes talked about therapist countertransference as a diagnostic signal.
Yes, this is about the therapist learning to notice when they're getting caught up in what the notes call enactments or projective identifications.
Can you explain those terms a bit? Being in the movie, as they put it.
Sure. An enactment is basically when the patient unconsciously draws the therapist into replaying some old relationship dynamic. Like if the patient felt ignored as a child, they might behave in ways that make the therapist feel strangely distant or dismissive, without either realizing why at first.
Okay. And projective identification.
That's when a patient projects an unwanted feeling or part of themselves onto the therapist, and the therapist actually starts to feel it or embody it. A patient feeling intensely inadequate might unconsciously make the therapist feel incompetent or overly critical.
Wow. So the therapist's feelings aren't just random static, they can be signals.
Exactly.
Mm.
The key practice highlighted in the notes is recognizing when you, the therapist, are in the movie, feeling things strongly, feeling stuck, feeling pulled in a certain direction, noticing that, pausing, reflecting, and getting back to an observing stance.
So you use your own internal reaction as data.
Yes, crucial diagnostic data. It allows you to offer help that's more emotionally honest and less reactive. It turns self-awareness into a therapeutic tool.
This all points towards a very active role for the therapist, especially when things get difficult for the patient. Which brings us to the last point, taking care of the process.
Right. This is about the therapist's responsibility to actively hold and protect the therapeutic space and the work itself.
How so?
It means noticing when the structure, the frame breaks down. Maybe the patient is getting lost in rambling, avoiding feelings, getting disorganized. The therapist's job is to gently but clearly name that. It seems we've gotten a bit lost here, or I notice we're moving away from that feeling again.
So bringing it back to the agreed upon work.
Yes, ensuring transparency and collaboration continue. By doing this consistently, the therapist helps the patient internalize a new way of relating one based on clarity, safety, and emotional honesty, instead of the old patterns of confusion or defense. The therapist models and maintains that healthier structure.
Listening to all this deep dive into the 2024-2025 supervision course notes, it really underscores that therapy isn't just about techniques.
Not at all.
It's this dynamic moment-to-moment relationship that demands, well, emotional honesty, clarity, simplicity even, and always that deep respect for the patient's own drive to heal.
Beautifully put. It's about learning to dance with the unconscious, like you said earlier, not trying to wrestle it into submission.
So, for everyone listening, how might these ideas resonate beyond therapy? The notes end with this thought. Remember, we are learners of the unconscious. We listen to it, make sense of it from our listening, and allow it to guide our work. This is where the wish to heal resides. This is our compass. Maybe think about that in your own life. Where do you encounter complex systems or interactions? How could deep listening, tolerating uncertainty, and trusting an underlying positive impulse, whether it's in a team, a project, or even within yourself, guide you?
It's a powerful principle.
It really is. And look, these insights we've touched on from John Frederickson and Yuval Noah's 2024-2025 course summary, they're just a taste, really.
Just scratching the surface.
If this way of thinking and working, this will-based, ISTDP-informed approach, resonates with you, if you're feeling inspired and want to go deeper in your own practice or understanding, then we really encourage you to consider joining the new supervision course they're offering. It starts in September 2025.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opportunity to really immerse yourself in this approach and refine your skills, learning directly how to apply these principles we've been discussing.
Definitely something to look into if this deep dive sparked your interest.